These are my 3 top reasons for using internal family systems in everyday life as a psychospiritual healing tool and honestly just to make all of your relationships better. Hi, I'm Amy Rose White. I'm a psychotherapist. My channel is all about psychospiritual healing, self-healing tools that you can use every day starting right now. So the first reason that I think internal family systems is an absolute must-have is that it reduces shame. Shame is probably the primary source of inner conflict for so many destructive behaviors that we all engage in at times. Whether we lash out at someone, we get defensive, we're critical, we're judgmental, because all judgment is really self-judgment. Most of that comes from some internalized quality of shame. And all that shame really is a sense of being fundamentally bad. It's really different than guilt, because guilt is about regretting an action that we believed harmed someone else and then having the skills, the awareness, and the information to do better next time. Shame is a sense that because we made a certain choice or we did something or didn't do something or we were accepted or we were rejected, that we're fundamentally bad. And that deep-seated belief is usually so out of our conscious awareness because it's so painful that we have protectors in the internal family systems model that keep us out of awareness of that. And that results in protecting ourselves, otherwise known as defense strategies, from that very feeling. And those behaviors are almost always maladaptive and ineffective in our day-to-day life. And in the second half of this video, I'm going to break down all the parts and elements of internal family systems to explain why. The second reason is it gives us a sense of control versus reactivity once we understand and actually befriend our internal family. All those sub-personalities that develop when we're small in response to overwhelming, difficult emotions, painful experiences that get shoved into the basement, as Dick Schwartz calls them. They become basement children out of our conscious awareness, those wounded, shameful, hurting, painful parts. When they are out of our conscious awareness, we end up engaging in those behaviors that limit our sense of agency. We actually feel impulsive. We feel out of control. And when we get to know our internal family system, we develop a whole new sense of a collaboration with ourselves that then gives us a sense of, I know how to respond to myself when I do that thing, when I engage in that pattern, when I start doing that self-destructive habit, whatever it is, whether it's self-harm or eating too much or thinking about cheating on your partner, any of those unhelpful patterns that you know deep down don't serve you, but you seem to feel almost like a sense of compulsion around, can dramatically be reduced by understanding the internal family system landscape. And the third reason is that it allows us to immediately de-escalate and even stop conflict with the people that we care about the most, whether that's our partner or our children or a family member, by having such an increased awareness of the different conflicting parts of us that are at play all the time, that we can acknowledge them for ourselves and actually own and acknowledge them in our relational dynamics. And anytime someone is able to say, you know what, a part of me right now is feeling really defensive and I think I need to take a break. Or a part of me really understands what you're saying and a part of me is afraid that you're going to reject me and leave me because I made a mistake. As soon as we have an internal compassionate language and an understanding of that inner community, we're able to actually talk about it with the people in our lives. And that makes it much, much less likely, unless you're in a really dysfunctional relationship with someone who doesn't have a lot of capacity for empathy, it really reduces the conflict and adversarial energy when someone just owns their stuff and acknowledges there's some different parts at play that they're not sure how to handle right now, or maybe they need a moment to regroup with those parts. A lot of compassion and understanding and patience comes online for both parties when the conflict can be handled from that perspective. And that is the major gift of internal family systems work. So now I'm going to talk in a little more detail than I did in my last video about internal family systems elements and the core key concepts to understand. So last time I talked about the self, protectors, and exiles. So, to briefly review, we have the core spiritual essence of a human, which is self, and I'm making a whole video about that soon. Then we have exile material. The exiles are those really shameful, hard, painful parts that have been generally moved into the unconscious. Because when we first experienced them, our nervous system found them too overwhelming to digest and process, or we did not have a caring, safe adult with capacity to walk us through our own internal experience. Or maybe we did, but they didn't know what we were going through, so they couldn't have helped us. It's not always the result of some like terrible person in our environment or, dysfunctional caregiver, although it can be. Sometimes it's just we were alone with an overwhelming emotion that nobody else knew about. And the only thing that our psyche had in its arsenal to keep us from feeling completely destroyed by that feeling is to develop a protector. And the protector is a defense strategy that essentially minimizes the pain, puts it out of conscious awareness, and helps you move forward with your life. Sometimes exiled material just kind of comes out on its own. One good example would be if you're at a movie and you feel just really activated by something and you start crying. Or a friend is telling you a story. This has actually happened to me during sessions on rare occasion, fortunately, where I'm just really deeply moved inside by hearing a client story because it's something in me that I haven't remembered or thought about in a very, very long time that gets brought up because there's a reflection in the client's story. Often that's why we tear up at movies or we get angry or we feel fear, is we're actually reconnecting to subconscious kind of buried material that's been exiled out of our awareness. And yet the pain is somehow activated and it starts kind of bubbling up. Now, sometimes if we have the right tools, that's a good thing because we can be in the present moment with that material. But typically what happens is we feel that material coming up and we misinterpret it as a sign that something is wrong instead of something is present. Oh, there's exiled material that's suddenly here and I don't know what to do with it. So those protectors usually step in really quick to either figure it out or minimize it and numb it with alcohol, drugs, shopping, porn, whatever. Or perhaps it just gets completely numbed out and we just go back to doing what we were before. Those are all ways that protectors can come in to help us manage exile material. The goal of IFS is so that when exile material does just emerge, maybe you've been watching so much news, you've been sick, you haven't been sleeping well, there's catastrophes happening in the world right now that are really hard to grapple, and your protectors just can't keep all that material out of your awareness anymore. You will feel really overwhelmed unless you have the skills that are taught in this model for culling self energy to be with that hard stuff and those little basement kids that come up seemingly out of nowhere that really just need our time, energy, and attention. Another way to understand the core concepts of IFS is to break down the idea of protectors into two distinct groups. And I argue, as I mentioned in the last video, that they really are on a continuum from extreme roles to preferred roles. In their extreme roles, Dick Schwartz's model considers those firefighters. Firefighters are doing things like sensing exiled material that's too much and immediately extinguishing it, literally with a fire hose. Now, we all know that a fire hose is really useful when it's truly an emergency. We need, I live in a house that has a sprinkler system and it would just douse everything, right? Or maybe you bring out your fire extinguisher from the pantry where mine is, or under the sink, and like you spray that white stuff that goes everywhere. It's going to make a huge mess. It's going to ruin all the food. Everything in the whole house gets destroyed by water, but the fire is out, right? No one burns to death. The place doesn't burn down. And so that's a really good metaphor for how firefighter parts in their extreme roles can end up doing more harm than good, all with the goal of keeping you safe and feeling in control and out of awareness of that really painful material in that right now moment. So some examples might be feeling just completely overwhelmed and cutting yourself, or going out and using a bunch of drugs, or calling a prostitute when you're really lonely or feeling bad about yourself. They are things that have higher consequences, or maybe, gambling all of your money or even harming someone else. Now, I know those all sound extreme, and that's what those parts are doing as firefighters in more extreme roles. They do things that cause a lot of chaos and trouble in the long term. So it's, if you've engaged ever in any behavior that's basically short-term gain, big long-term loss. So maybe you punch your boss in the face, for example. Maybe it's not so much as like actually hurting someone, but you're gonna just like lash out and punch someone. I know I've wanted to do that in the past. So in any case, but there's a part that kept me from doing that, right? There's a manager, and that is the protector in a preferred role. When a part keeps you from punching your boss in the face, it's acting in a preferred role, because it's basically keeping you in line with society's norms. It's keeping you from making choices that are going to result in really negative long-term consequences. It's just kind of keeping you functioning. So in its preferred role, a protector can be a wonderful ally. It absolutely keeps us, doing our daily life. It's the part of, I know me as a person that's developed the awareness to be able to really listen to difficult feedback or someone who's upset with me, because I'm practicing my preferred role more often than not. And I'm able to access that because I practice connecting to self energy so much that my sense of safety and security and belonging in the world is no longer as it was when I was a kid, totally dependent on how the adults felt about me on that given day, or whether someone was available or showed up, or whether I was accepted and included in the group, at school or something like that. As I've grown older and I've had the luxury of practicing all the things that I've been learning, in my work as a therapist and teaching that to others over many, many years, I have access to that self energy. Now, not always. That also kind of comes and goes depending on my own inner resources. So ideally, when you're working with this model, you can identify that all of the parts, these different elements that come up at different ages, different circumstances, different times of life, and they develop their own unique beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors about the world, that they are just kind of always moving, doing this dance on a continuum of preferred to extreme. And when they are in their preferred role, Dick Schwartz called them managers. So firefighters are kind of blowing up your life, and managers are keeping it running. And when we think about the opportunity that our parts have to just move from extreme to preferred, if we stop, we get connected to them, we see what's going on in our body, we actually dialogue with them as if they were people. We ask them questions like, okay, I see you're here. Can I talk to you? Would you give me a little breathing room so that we could chat? I want to know what's going on. You can say that to any part, anytime you feel out of sorts in any way, and simply say, what do you want me to know? How are you trying to help me right now? What would happen if you stopped doing this for me? So the goal with parts work is to recognize that they exist, understand it's not the dominant feature of who you are as self and self energy, that clarity, courage, consciousness, compassionate, wise self that you are deep, deep down. You were born that way, you will die that way. That's the essence of who you are from a psycho-spiritual lens. From that place, we can then engage in dialogue with these subpersonalities to understand their motivations. And I know it sounds pretty out there and a little crazy, but there are thousands and thousands of therapists and other healthcare practitioners that have been using this method for nearly 3 decades, although it's increased in its popularity recently. And it gives us the ability to what we call in mental health, externalize the problem. So instead of seeing ourselves innately or fundamentally as lazy, selfish, jealous, dumb, unmotivated, whatever those like harsh inner judgments that we label on ourselves as a whole, or even depressed, like I am depressed, is a very different experience than saying depression is here. There's a depressed part that is telling me there's no point in my life, or I'm of no use, or I messed everything up again. There's a depressed part that's telling me that. How could I work with it, listen to it, ask it what will happen if it stops telling me that there's no point to my life? That's how internal family systems dialogue actually ends up unfolding. I'll be giving a more detailed and kind of illustrative example of this as time goes on this month. Since this is my theme this month, I'm talking all about internal family systems as a psycho-spiritual healing method. But those are the core aspects of IFS and how it can be used and why it's so beneficial in day-to-day life. I hope you'll join me with this journey as we explore IFS in more detail, and please leave me comments below to let me know your questions or how you've experienced IFS to be a powerful healing force in your own life. Until next time, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you be at peace. Bye for now.